Mr. Speaker.
Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Speaker.
Man from Davao City. If he so desires.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm deeply concerned with the statements made by the Honorable gentleman from Cebu regarding the legitimacy and illegitimacy of the candidates who won. Primarily, my concern is obviously in Davao City. I'd like to make mention that there's a peculiar case in Davao City because in our city, no statement of votes were actually generated at the conclusion of the elections, and upon counting by the counting machines and the supposed transmission of that to the Sanggunian, strangely enough in Davao City, there were no statements of votes that was generated. So I was wondering if the gentleman from Cebu would consider that a violation also of the Republic Act on the automated election law.
Your Honor, in the first place, as I explained, Republic Act 9369 prescribes and mandates for the use of a voting machine. That is the definition of an automated election system. That provision of the law was not followed or enforced by or implemented by COMELEC. Now, even in the automation process relating to the canvassing and transmission of election returns, this provision, the provisions of 9369 were also violated by the COMELEC, because under 9369, the election returns should have been printed in an automated election in 100 copies at the polling place. And one copy of the first copy should have been transmitted directly to the canvassing board. But as practiced by COMELEC, the election returns were not transmitted to the Board of Canvassers, but it was still coursed through the so-called server and from the server to the voting machine, to the canvassing board. This procedure was not in accordance with Republic Act 1969.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Also, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to ask the gentleman from Cebu if he is aware that the ballots used in the May 10, 2010 elections in fact did not have any serial numbers. And I'd like to ask, Mr. Chairman, if the gentleman from Cebu would agree with me that this is also a violation of our election laws, because the laws, our election laws specifically provide that ballots to be used in the election must have serial numbers. Strangely enough, the serial numbers did not appear in our ballots on the May 10, 2010 elections.
Republic Act 9369 in Section 13 provides for the configuration of the official ballots, and in other provisions of Republic Act 9369, there are provisions requiring safeguards to establish the authenticity of official ballots. As a matter of fact, one of the requirements of an EAS is that it must provide the voter a voter-verified paper audit trail so that the ballot can be identified by the voter. So it should contain serial numbers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd also like to ask the gentleman from Cebu if he experienced the same thing in his district and his city. Because in Davao City, there were priority numbers that were used during the conduct of elections in May 10 of 2010. Now, I've searched for a provision in the law providing for giving out priority numbers, but I failed to see that in the law. And during one of the committee hearings on the Committee on Suffrage, I asked one of the commissioners if there was such a provision or a memorandum or an order from the COMELEC asking the election officers to use priority numbers, and they said no. So I'd like to ask the gentleman from Cebu, Mr. Speaker, if he is of the opinion that the using of priority numbers during the May 10, 2010 election was also a violation of the automated election law.
Actually, as I said, from the very beginning, the COMELEC violated Republic Act 9369 because the system that was used was not the system prescribed and mandated by Republic Act 9369. You were asking about an experience in my district. Because of the roundabout way of transmitting election results from the precinct, it was to be sent to a center in Manila and not to the Board of Canvassers. And it is from the so-called server in Manila that the Board of Canvassers will receive the election results. Now, in one precinct, clustered precinct, in our town, the Manhug, in Cebu, the results in that precinct showed that we obtained votes. But what the returns that was received from Manila was that we got 0 in that precinct. But since the results would not anymore affect the results of the canvassing, we just let it go.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd also like to ask the gentleman from Cebu this question. For all the violations of the automated election law, it seems that it was validated through resolutions issued by the COMELEC and Bank, such as resolutions canceling the requirement for UV lighting, ultraviolet lighting, resolution amending the digital signatures, and the resolution calling for the switching of the CF cards. I think that was 10 days, 8 days before election. And many other resolutions that were issued by the COMELEC and Bank. Is the gentleman from Cebu of the opinion that a resolution can amend a law that was passed by Congress prescribing the very stringent measures in order for us to safeguard the elections?
Of course, a resolution is supposed to implement the law. It is not a law by itself.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. My next question is, would the gentleman from Cebu now kindly tell us his opinion on whether or not we should still use the automated election system and apply the automated election law for the coming elections in 2013?
Actually, even if we want to, we cannot. Because if we have to follow and implement 9369, which calls for the use of voting machines, aside from counting machines later on, we may not be able to afford it. It will be recalled that after the armed election, and because of the reported success of the armed election, which was supposed to be or reported to be automated, there was a national clamor for automated election. And the first reaction of COMELEC was that in order to conduct an automated election, we would need some 60 billion pesos. That was the statement of COMELEC, because voting machines are expensive. In the last armed election, I was told by one of the commissioners that in some areas in armed, they used voting machines. And how much was spent by COMELEC in the armed election? The armed election cost over 2 billion pesos. Only 5 provinces, and with a voting population of maybe 2.5 million. If we go by that ratio of expenses, then, as earlier reported by COMELEC, we would need for the entire country, if it is a real automated election, the amount of 60 billion or even more.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the gentleman from Cebu for raising this very important issue and for enlightening this chamber on these legal matters. And I'd like to thank you for his time and for acceding to my questions. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much, distinguished gentleman from Cebu.
Majority Friendly.
Mr. Speaker, I move that we refer the privileged speech of the Deputy Speaker, Pablo Garcia, as well as the interpellations to the appropriate committee.
Any objection? Hearing none, the same is approved. Majority.
Kalamboan Dala Tanan, usa ka oras nga programa maghatod kaninyo sa mga katikaran may kalabutan sa kalambuan dili lamang sa komunidad apan sa kinatibukan. Kauban si